Hello, everyone. I'm here for one of my stories. This is Lindsay Dunn, and today I'm speaking to Bart Cortright, who is the cinematographer for The Cathedral, directed by Ricky D'Ambrose. The Cathedral made its US premiere at Sundance 2022. Bart is a Brooklyn-based cinematographer with a hearty list of credits on IMDb, including a previous project with Ricky D'Ambrose before, which was called Notes on an Appearance. Bart, welcome to one of my stories.
Hi, nice to be here.
So is The Cathedral your first project that has made it to Sundance?
Yeah, it is.
Well, congratulations for that. I know that Sundance probably isn't, I wouldn't say everybody in the world agrees Sundance is the big one, but it was always the film festival I heard the most about growing up in the US. So I think it's fun. I do see people when they do their speech at the movie, often they'll say, we've tried for several years to get into Sundance, and this is our first one. And it seems to be a proud moment for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So I caught the Cathedral towards the tail end of Sundance, but I will say it had, for me, one of the more intriguing previews or premises when I watched the video, and I saw it was like this movie about a kid growing up starting in the 80s and watching America change. And it's quite a unique story and has a unique look. The description on IMDb simply reads, an only child's meditative, impressionistic account of an American family's rise and fall over 2 decades. That description really doesn't do the film justice. What's your elevator pitch for the movie?
That's a good question. I mean, it's so hard to describe Ricky's style. I mean, I do kind of just say it's kind of a coming of age story. I mean, very much in Ricky's style. It's kind of like, it's almost like a series of, moments in this, person's life, from before they were born to, their late adolescence. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough to describe Ricky's style in words.
Well, we can get more in the style, but we do agree that it's about growing up and trying to make sense of the things around you that you're seeing, especially in your family of origin. You're trying to make sense of it all, and often you feel like you're a passenger in your own life. You're not the driver, and you're kind of watching everybody and you're processing it, but you don't know if what you're processing is actually what's happening. It's very confusing. It's a confusing time growing up. And it's set in
Yeah.
Long Island. The style, it is a very interesting style, and we'll talk about that more. When I was watching it, I was trying to go, does this remind me of anything at all? And the closest I could come up with was Wes Anderson, because he often has these moments where he'll stop and capture a scene, and it's almost like a scene in a dollhouse or something. But that's a very whimsical, his movies tend to be very whimsical. So this was almost like that, but much more serious and morose and also jacked up 10 times. So we're going to be spending most of our interview talking about the Cathedral, but could you tell us how you got into cinematography as a career?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I grew up as an only child and, watched a lot of movies. I had a great professor in high school who taught experimental film and taught a lot of kind of like the, go-to Criterion movies, essentially. So I kind of became, very interested in movies at a young age. And then I went to school for theater and was working in theater and had the opportunity to shoot a feature almost 10 years ago now. And, watching that film back was just so, it was more fulfilling and more exciting than, anything that I had done in theater up to that point. So I kind of slowly transitioned out of theater and into film. And yeah, and I mean, I had been shooting movies all throughout high school and college as well. But yeah, so I've been doing it for I guess close to 10 years now, full time.
So did you take college classes in that at all, or was it
Nope.
more of a yeah?
I did a photo minor. I went to a conservatory for lighting design for theater actually at Carnegie Mellon. And everyone, yeah, I had a lot of mixed feelings about where to go for college. And when I got into Carnegie Mellon, everyone said I should do that. And sadly, I didn't take any film classes. So I really don't have any formal film training at all. But, you learn a lot from, I mean, when I started to transition out of theater, I just kind of took any job I could find shooting, and just really learned that way.
Well, they do call, you said you have a photo minor. They do call also a cinematographer a director of photography. So
Yeah,
it's definitely touching on that. So if you were to explain to somebody what a cinematographer does, how would you describe that?
sure. It's funny. It's changed so much over the years, and every project is so different, and the DP's relationship with the director is always so different. I mean, essentially, you're in charge of the image, the lighting, the lenses, the frame, everything in the frame. I mean, some directors are really specific about what they want. Some directors really lean on the DP, and there's obviously tons of examples in between those two. Ricky is definitely someone who's more of a visual person and will, really nitpick on the frame, a lot. Um, but yeah, so it really depends on, the director and the project.
Is it fair to say that the director, because I was reading this, and sometimes even as a film critic, I have to look up and Google, what does this person do? Because I want to give credit to the right person in my reviews.
Sure.
So when I was looking at, I know the cinematographer is in charge of lighting, but they also are in charge of the framing of the shots. But to me, I always thought the director kind of picks. So would you say that, is it fair to say like the director is the brains and then the cinematographer or the DP is the hands that makes it happen? Is that a correct assessment?
It again, it comes back so much to the relationship. Like with someone like Ricky really does dictate a lot of what the image is. And someone like David Fincher, I know, is also very specific. He'll say, put that light there, put the camera that put it low, put it 2 feet off the ground on a 25 millimeter, cut it off here, blah blah blah. But like when you're operating handhelds, for example, a lot of the time you have very minimal direction from the director, and you kind of have to wing it, and you're more in control of the image. And most directors aren't as specific as I'd say Ricky or David Fincher, for example, and you get a lot of leeway as the DP, and it's there's a lot of trust there, and you hire the person because you trust their eye and you think they're gonna do the best job for the film. So again, it really varies. It's a weird line. You never, I guess it's hard as an outsider to really know who's more responsible for the framing, but every relationship is different.
So how did you start collaborating with Ricky?
Sure. So Ricky emailed me maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he had made a few short films, just like on his DSLR, like all by himself, and he sent them to me, and I thought they were really interesting, and it was a completely different style than a lot of like my peers or other jobs that come along. And I was recommended to him by Graham Swan, who is the producer for Notes on Appearance, and I've shot 2 films that Graham has directed. I actually went to Carnegie Mellon with him. So I ended up working with Ricky on Notes, and it went really well. And then we did a few shorts after that, and then we did Cathedral together.
Your role as a cinematographer was pretty vital for this film because of the because so much of it is, there's an emphasis on what the camera sees, the camera's gaze, and how that makes us feel and tells the story. And I understand that the lighting was very important. So how did you go about creating the lighting choices that you did, and give us some examples of that? And that's probably what we'll spend most of the time on, is because the lighting was very interesting. So could you talk to us about that?
Sure. Yeah, so Ricky, so a big thing that happens, with the director and a DP is, you normally both kind of bring images to the table just as a, starting point of how you want the film to look. And Ricky, I mean, I had a sense of how Ricky wanted it to look based off of his previous films, but when he brought references for this film, they were a little bit more, naturalistic and single source lighting and kind of indirect daylight kind of inspired images. And he also had a number of images from his childhood, 35 millimeter photographs that his parents, I guess, presumably took, that had a great range of light, like a lot of use of hard light. Um, and those were a big inspiration too. And I think those were a bit darker than maybe Ricky was originally thinking he'd go. And I based a lot of my work off of that. So, I mean, I always, when I walk into a space, I more think about light than about the frame, to be honest. So, a lot of the images in the film and where I chose to put the lights were just based off of the location and just trying to play into what was already there and try to keep it as, naturalistic as possible. Yeah.
Did you limit the time of day you shot scenes because of the lighting?
Yeah, so I mean, in the script, Ricky always, I mean, every director always dictates what time of day it is. So Ricky, most of this film, there's a few scenes at night, very little, but everything's during the day. And Ricky didn't also want any like overhead lights or lamps. I mean, we maybe use them once or twice, but it's mostly, just the idea of soft light coming in through windows. Um, and yeah, and it's funny too, with a lot of films, you can use, you can shoot wide open, like you can open up the iris all the way. And that allows you not to light a lot of the time, but Ricky really likes a lot of depth of field. So that requires a lot of lights rather than go off of natural light a lot of the time. And so it's just always, I was always just doing my best to try to, make it feel as natural as possible and not lit and not stylize it at all, like adding hair lights or anything unnecessary.
So what were some of the hardest hardest choices to make in the film, as far as, were there some, yeah, what were the biggest challenges you had when creating the look you were looking for and that Ricky was looking for?
Yeah, there were two images and two shots that were really difficult. One was, I don't know if you remember, but there's a scene where Geraldine Singer, who's plays one of the aunts, she is sitting at a table on the phone and there's like family in the background on the patio. So basically to get them both at the same like amount of light and to get them both in focus, I had to stop down the lens, quite a lot. So that just required pumping a ton of light onto Geraldine and, shooting, at a level that you'd normally shoot outside, just, to bring it up so much. And then there was another scene where everyone is eating outside. It's for a birthday when Jesse's pretty young, and Ricky wanted this kind of stippled light effect, like light coming through trees, and the location just didn't give us that ability. So we had to go and grab a bunch of branches and shoot right before magic hour when it was just dark enough where the light would read, and try to we tried to recreate the photo almost exactly. There were a few images like that where we recreated the 35 millimeter photos almost exactly. But yeah, those were probably the most challenging. I mean, it was a little tricky too doing the graduation scene just because that was like in a restaurant and there were no windows. So I just tried to make it, I don't know, I don't even know what the motivation for the light is, but I just tried to make it feel as natural. I was hoping that no one would think about where the light was coming from, trying to make it feel natural. But yeah.
So you keep saying make it feel natural. So
Mm-hmm.
what is but it's not natural because you're having to make it natural. So how do you
Sure.
make something natural?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess in a lot of films, they would add a hair light and sculpt it. They'll add like a kicker, like a little bit of light on the side of my face, to pull me out from the background. And with Ricky's films, I mean, a lot of DPs strive for this. It's not anything unique, trying to make it feel natural. But I just really tried to limit trying to make it look too pretty and trying to embrace however the light was acting that day, whether it was hard light, which can sometimes be unflattering and a little intense, or soft light at times, and just trying to make it feel motivated, really.
Mhm.
And honestly trying to make it feel kind of unnoticed, and just be there and not draw attention to itself.
The locations you shot, so a lot of scenes take place in a house. Were those houses, are those real houses you filmed in, or were they created from a studio?
So they were all real locations. What's really crazy is that Jesse's father's apartment, which is the one with kind of the pink and light blue colored wallpaper and things, was is Ricky's real apartment that he grew up in, and that his dad still lives at and has lived at for 30 years. So we shot there, I think, for 4 days, and then the rest of the houses were, we just went on a lot of scouts in Long Island and tried to find period appropriate houses and that would have the right things that we'd need. So that was a little tough too, just because sometimes the sun wouldn't be where we'd want it to be, or there wouldn't be as many windows as we wanted, or the rooms were small. But we just, with our budget scale, we couldn't build sets. We had to just kind of embrace these locations.
And I guess you had to look for houses maybe that hadn't done a lot of upgrades, renovation, to create that good old 80s look.
Yeah, there was one house in particular that was, I think, had just been sold, but we luckily got in. I think they were going to demo it or rip all the furniture out, but it was still very like 80s, and it worked out perfectly for the film.
What's next for the Cathedral? Is it going to more festivals, or is a distributor in the books, or what's going next with this movie?
Yeah, well, it's playing at Rotterdam right now. And then I know we're hoping to find a festival in New York to play it. And we do have, I believe, a sales agent for distribution. So, we're looking for that, and hopefully we'll have some kind of, as big of a theatrical run as a movie of this type can have. And I guess that's it. And hopefully it leads to Ricky being able to make more movies.
You worked with him on Notes, and you work with Cathedral now. How has your partnership evolved over time? Was the Cathedral easier to work together on?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. Ricky, he's a funny guy. He kind of keeps his cards close to his chest to some degree. He's not going to tell you what he wants the movie to mean or say. He really likes it to speak for itself. So sometimes it's hard to, he gives a lot of great direction. He's very specific. He's one of the most decisive and direct directors I've worked with. But I think with Notes, since we hadn't worked together, it was a really small movie with a really small amount of money. We had to work really quickly. There just was less conversation, and he had never worked with me before. So, after we had done 2 shorts together, and we know each other, we run into each other at movies kind of fairly often. We both live in New York. There was just a lot more trust there, and I think he leaned on me a bit more creatively, and sometimes I just frame stuff up based on his storyboards, and he'd be like, "Yep, great, exactly, what I'm going for." So it was nice in that regard.
What's next for you? Do you have new projects lined up, or what are you going to be working on next?
I just kind of finished a few films. I finished a film with Graham Swan, the producer of this film, that we shot out in Iowa with a great cast. And I'm shooting a film coming, we don't know exactly yet when we're shooting it, but it's directed by Peter Vack, who I've worked with a few times in other movies. And whatever else comes my way, I don't know yet.
Yeah, I know. So, sometimes you can't talk about certain things too, which is fine.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that too.
So where can people follow your work if they want to know more about your projects and other things you've worked on?
Sure. Yeah, my website's just my name, Bart Cortright, and then I'm on Instagram as Barton Dillingham, which is my middle name.
Okay, well, I will have all that in the notes for this interview. And thank you for your time. I encourage people to look for the Cathedral at a festival or a streaming or video on demand when you can. It's a very unique movie. So do look for that and within the next year, and hopefully it will do well. And because I feel like it's a new, almost like a new style of filmmaking. It'll be interesting to see what people make of it when it comes out.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much. It was
Yeah.
nice chatting with you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. And I'll see everyone next time on one of my stories.